Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and we're getting near the end of the series that I've been doing on selling and servicing of used equipment, in particular fishing reels. And we've talked an awful lot over the last few sessions about how do you go and define what marketplace you're in, what type of reels you want to work on, and then where do you acquire those reels, who is your customer, and then we looked at what are the sources and how to go about repairing the reels. And so today we're going to focus on what are the outlets, where can you sell those reels. And while I've been focusing on the repair and resale of the reel itself, there is a secondary business out there which is the standalone repair. And they kind of go side by side, and you'll find that as you're developing your business or your market that you're servicing into, you may start by selling used reels, and ultimately somebody will come back and tell you they have one of these reels that needs some repair. So I thought I would spend a few minutes now talking about where do you sell and how do you sell and what are some of the associated costs. And then this thing will wrap up with the economics of the business itself in a future session. But for now, let's look at the avenues that you have, the major marketplaces, and some of what you can expect to find out there. So the first one is the direct, and it's person to person. And person to person is usually how most of us get started. And it's either selling to friends and family and associates maybe that you fish with. Word gets out there that you're working on reels, that you've recently completed some repairs or some overhauls, and the folks are looking for that particular type of reel or model or whatever, and you just negotiate face to face. A lot of that word of mouth happens from some of the other things we were talking about in terms of the business itself. It's referrals. It's business that's generated maybe from the business cards that you had if you were selling at a flea market or something, which we'll cover. But if you were selling there and you had a sign out that says I repair and buy, people also ask about acquiring those as well. It's also about working with local fishing clubs, working with your existing customers who may have purchased with you before. And the final one in terms of selling direct is tag or garage sales. So you can set up in your own on your own property or local community center or whatever, and have a sale itself where you sell your equipment. So those are all direct type of selling efforts there. The costs are really limited to your time and the effort that you put into it. There's some marginal costs, for example, with the business cards and the like. But your pricing on that, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the final session, but your pricing really is what's the cost of your labor and the time that you put into to making the sale that yields your profit at the end of the day. The second one then is formal face-to-face markets, and you've heard me reference some of these in the prior conversations. Flea markets and fishing shows, town fairs, the local VFW or American Legion selling outside sales or indoor sales or the like is another way to sell direct, represent your product, build your business. And the cost there really is the cost of entry plus your time. So I've sold through some of those that have been relatively cheap, maybe $5 or $10 for an 8-foot table, and I've been in some that have been relatively expensive, $100 or $200. And those pricing is usually driven by the amount of customers that you could expect and the turnover and the amount of sales that you generate. So you want to get to a position where you can figure that you're going to cost you somewhere between 5 and 10% of your total sales is what the cost of entry would be. So again, if you have a $100 table, you better expect to spend $1,000 or sell $1,000 in equipment. If you have a $5 or a $10 table, then $100 would probably clear you for that. And of course, on the other side of it, and again, we'll talk about economics later, you're going to have to price your product up to cover those costs. So your cost becomes not only the labor and your time, and the acquisition cost of the reel and so on, but it also becomes the cost of entry. There's a third one which is marginally direct, and that's ads. So we're all familiar with the local town shoppers and that. You can put an ad in a newspaper that drives sales. And then there's those online sites, Craigslist, LetGo, OfferUp, and so on, that you can use to have people inquire and come out and buy from you direct. And most of the time, there's a minimal cost in that in terms of the ad, and some of those sites like Craigslist and that might be free. It's really the cost of the product, your time, your labor, and also there's some incidental costs there as well, like the cost of no-shows, where maybe you've sat around on a Saturday afternoon waiting for somebody to come by to see it and got canceled out on. So the direct ad-generated is used. I don't know anybody who uses it as a primary marketplace, but it is certainly used there as well. So let's shift over there then to the indirect selling, and I'll just use one example because it's the one I use. It's eBay. In the online marketplace, you need to have higher end products, or you need to cluster lower end products in order to make it attractive to your buyer and to make it cost effective. So from a fee standpoint, eBay gets on average 10% of the final sale, which is the sale plus the shipping. If you're using PayPal as a source of settlement, PayPal is going to get an additional 1 to 2% of the cost of the payment. So you're at about 12% plus the cost to ship. So if you're going to sell a $20 reel, eBay is going to get $2 and PayPal is going to get 25 cents. And then you got to ship the product. So you've got to take, let's say you have a $20 reel, and in there you've priced your profit or what your expected return was from your labors. You've got to make sure that the $20 covers the approximately $3 in the fees that they have, and then you've got a cost in shipping. So the way shipping is going these days, is probably going to cost you between $7 and $10 or $12 to ship that product. And the economics of that says that a $20 reel just became a $35 reel in sale. And does that make any sense? So most of the folks selling in eBay are either selling the higher end product, something that probably starts at $40 or $50, where they are able to cover some of those costs, or they're bundling the low-end products. So you may have 3 reels that you would sell for $10 or $15 a piece, bundling them into a similar sale of 3 for the single sale will add up to a critical mass where the customer's figuring out that hey, shipping was as much as the reel was, right? So you just some tips on that, but there's a lot of expense associated with online, plus the time. If you're going to sell on eBay or any of the other online markets, you've got to get to a post office, you've got to acquire the packing and supplies and the other materials that go along with that. So it's a good way to move hard to sell items or rare items, but you need to make sure that you have plenty of upside in that when you go to sell. And then finally, the third-party sale. The third-party selling is using somebody else to sell your product. We've talked about on the front end the direct sales being possibly using flea markets. You can develop relationships with flea market vendors that become a seller for you, where all you worry about is, what did you acquire the reels for? What did it cost to repair? What was your time in that? And then you sell it to them for an appropriate return and let them mark up to cover their selling of pieces. Another one is a consignment shop or thrift shops. There are a lot of folks that will take fishing equipment on consignment, and in that case, again, it's what did it cost you, and then what are you going to pay that consignment store in terms of price up, and then can you earn from that? So there's a low cost, low overhead in using third parties. However, there's a lower return there as well, and you need to figure that in. And then finally, just as a standalone business, the servicing of fishing reels. There's really a few ways to do it, but again, you're looking at what is it going to cost you for pieces and parts? What do you expect in terms of your labor? And then if you're not getting these things directly, what is it going to cost to ship or transport them, or other time associated expenses with that? So if you're building a business that's solely based on servicing reels, not acquiring and reselling, your outlets are pretty much the same, but with a little bit of a different bent. So you can do the person-to-person. You can do online, but online you're going to have to say, okay, my fixed expense, and we'll use an example here, my fixed expense is $10 to open the reel up, plus parts, plus postage, right? So again, it may cost the person who needs to repair $25 or $30 at the end. We talked a little bit about other sources where you may work. You may provide the repair service for bait and tackle shops. You may provide the repair service for charter boats. In those cases, you got to think about what does it take you to get down to the store. What are you burning in gas? How many hours are you going to spend transporting these things, and so on? And you want to get a return on that in addition to your return for the actual servicing of the reels. So I wanted to do this just to kind of close out the notion that yes, you can acquire, you can repair, and then you need to do something with those reels, which is usually the selling. I wanted to give you an idea of the marketplaces and a little bit of the costs associated with that, and I hope that this video has accomplished it. If you have questions or comments, please write them in. If you have other avenues where you sell, let's share those with the folks that are viewing these as well. And if there's anything that needs clarification, please ask, and I can work with you to see if I can provide you that information as well. I hope you've been enjoying the series. We'll wrap this thing up with the economics of the business on the next one. And I hope it's been beneficial to those of you that have been thinking about doing this. I hope it's encouraged you to get started in it. It's very rewarding, and I hope you'll share some of the excitement about doing these things. So with that, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for viewing the series.